White cop harasses black woman in court, doesn't know she's a lethal Navy SEAL. Simone Davis walked into the county courthouse with her head held high, heart pounding in her chest. She had been wronged, falsely accused by a vindictive neighbor, and now she was here to clear her name. The grey marble corridors echoed with tension as she passed by stern-faced officers. But one cop in particular, Officer Garrett Thorne, singled her out, his gaze fierce and full of contempt. Simone could see the judgment in his eyes. Little did Garrett know that beneath Simone's graceful exterior lay years of elite Navy SEAL training. He had no idea who he was harassing, but he was about to find out. Simone Davis had been awake since dawn, anxiety sizzling in her stomach. She'd gone through basic morning routines, a quick jog to keep her reflexes sharp, then a stop at her local coffee shop in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. The city was alive with early commuters, coffee lovers, and sleepy tourists meandering toward the waterfront. Passing by old architecture and the soft hum of classical music from a nearby street performer, Simone tried to calm her nerves. Today was the day of her court hearing, and she had every intention of walking away from the courthouse with her dignity and her freedom intact. Simone was a woman of remarkable contradictions. She looked delicate and sophisticated, but beneath that polished exterior lay an iron will honed by intense discipline. Years before, she had enlisted in the Navy straight out of high school, determined to serve her country with valor and pride. Training at Naval Base Coronado in San Diego, she had endured some of the toughest physical and mental challenges imaginable, forging unbreakable bonds with her fellow recruits. She eventually found her path into an elite Navy SEAL unit, an achievement that, to this day, only a handful of women had even aspired to. Her role in the SEALs had given her a sense of control over her life. She had fought in classified missions, seen the ugliest sides of conflict, and survived them all. When her term of service ended, she returned to civilian life with a quiet grace, wanting to start anew. She rarely mentioned her military past to anyone because she believed that service was sacred. Only those who shared the sacrifice would truly understand. On this particular morning, Simone wore a simple knee-length grey dress paired with low heels. She had her hair in a neat bun, her only adornment a delicate gold pendant that had belonged to her late grandmother. As she entered the courthouse lobby, she was met by the usual chaos of police officers, attorneys juggling paperwork, and anxious civilians waiting for their names to be called. The reason for her court appearance was an infuriating misunderstanding. A neighbor in her building had accused her of causing noise disturbances at absurd hours of the night, and after repeated complaints to building management, the situation escalated into a legal nuisance case. Simone suspected the neighbor's motives ran deeper than a mere noise dispute. She'd caught the older woman, Miss S. Fitzgerald, making thinly veiled comments about Simone's background. Despite being polite, Simone sensed the neighbor's prejudice simmering beneath the surface. Miss S. Fitzgerald had resources and connections in the city. She pulled strings to get the matter advanced. Before Simone realized it, she received a summons to appear in municipal court. She was determined to present her evidence logbooks and witness accounts to prove the complaints were false. Yet, she was uneasy. She'd heard stories about the local police department having some officers with questionable records regarding racial profiling. In her mind, Simone hoped for the best, but prepared for the worst, as she'd been trained to do since her earliest days in the Navy. When Simone walked through the metal detector at the courthouse entrance, she noticed Officer Garrett Thorne standing by, leaning against a pillar. Tall, with a pristine uniform hugging his muscular frame, Garrett had a perpetual scowl that deepened whenever his gaze fell upon a person of color. It was almost imperceptible, that flicker of scorn, but Simone recognized it at once. She had spent enough years reading body language and micro-expressions to see the hostility behind his eyes. "Ma'am, step aside for additional screening," Officer Thorne ordered, his tone clipped. Simone complied silently, hoping it was just standard procedure. She placed her purse on a separate tray and held her arms out. The metal detector had already approved her, but Garrett insisted on running a handheld scanner across her body. Each time he hovered near the metallic clasp of her dress or the buckle of her low heels, he paused dramatically. "Please remove your shoes," he said flatly. "I'm sorry?" Simone asked, trying to keep her voice level. "Remove your shoes," he repeated, a trace of smugness in his voice. Not wanting to escalate matters, Simone complied. She could feel multiple eyes on her, silently judging. With practiced composure, she handed the shoes to the officer. He inspected them with unnecessary diligence, then gave them back. "That should do," he said, stepping away with a grunt. Without saying another word, Simone slipped her shoes back on. She picked up her purse and resumed her trek to the designated courtroom. The unspoken tension in that exchange stayed with her. She recalled the code of conduct she had embraced in the Navy. Calm is contagious. She would not let his hostility rattle her. There were more important battles to fight. Upon entering courtroom 3B, Simone saw Judge Harriet Wilcox presiding. Known for her no-nonsense approach, Judge Wilcox had a reputation for fairness. Still, Simone remained cautious. She spotted Miss S. Fitzgerald sitting at a table, wearing a smug smile and pearls that reflected the overhead fluorescent lights. Her attorney, Martin Sims, was a well-known local litigator who thrived on intimidating opponents. Simone found her seat at the defendant's table. She had opted to represent herself for this initial hearing, relying on her meticulous record-keeping and calm demeanor. Her papers were organized in a plain folder, each documented date and time of the alleged noise violations neatly categorized. As the session started, attorneys for various cases stepped forward. Each time the bailiff announced a new case, Officer Thorne would escort defendants in and out of the courtroom. He seemed to position himself in Simone's peripheral vision, like a spectre waiting to cause trouble. She tried to ignore him, focusing on Judge Wilcox's voice as she addressed a different dispute about property lines. Moments later, the bailiff called Simone's case. She stood, smoothing down her grey dress, and approached the bench. Mrs. Fitzgerald and her attorney walked confidently to the opposite table, passing Simone with a derisive glare. Case number 204-316B, Fitzgerald v. Davis, the bailiff announced. Alleged nuisance complaint. Judge Wilcox cleared her throat. "Miss Fitzgerald, Mr. Sims, please state your argument." Sims launched into a well-rehearsed speech about how Miss S. Fitzgerald had been kept up all hours of the night by thumping music and aggressive behavior in the hallway. He painted Simone as an unruly, disruptive neighbor who had little respect for community standards. Simone listened intently, taking mental notes. When it was her turn, Simone presented her evidence methodically. She provided timestamps from her security system, statements from 2 other neighbors who heard no noise, and even an alibi for the nights in question. She had been away on a short assignment in Washington, D.C. Judge Wilcox frowned thoughtfully while flipping through Simone's logbooks. "Miss Davis, these are quite detailed. They contradict Miss S. Fitzgerald's accounts entirely. Mr. Sims, do you have any direct evidence, video recordings, decibel readings, anything at all to support your client's claim?" Sims stammered, scanning his own folder. "We have Miss S. Fitzgerald's sworn testimony. We believe that's sufficient. She's a well-respected member of the community." "That may be so," said the judge, "but in this courtroom, we require more than just one person's word if contradictory evidence is presented. Miss Davis's logs and witness statements hold substantial weight. Miss S. Fitzgerald's expression soured. Simone forced herself not to smirk. She knew the battle wasn't over yet. During a brief recess, Simone stepped into the hallway to catch her breath. She felt a presence behind her before hearing a voice. "Think you're real clever, don't you?" Officer Thorne sneered. She turned slowly. "Excuse me?" He stepped closer, an air of menace about him. "You come in here, act all smug, like you own the place. But I know your type." Simone's posture stiffened. Memories of tense standoffs in remote corners of the world flooded her mind. She had faced armed insurgents who bore more sincerity in their eyes than this man. Still, she refused to let him see her flinch. "My type?" she asked, voice steady. Garrett's lips twisted into a contemptuous smile. "Troublemakers, playing victim when someone calls them out." Every fiber of Simone's being told her to walk away. She'd seen countless men like him, men who believed their badge gave them authority to disrespect anyone who looked or acted differently. So she inhaled, recalled the mantra from her days in training, and stepped aside. Her mission was not to fight him. It was to clear her name. But a part of her wanted to reveal the truth about who she was just to see his smug expression crumble. However, the seal in her prevailed. She gave him a cool look. "Have a nice day, officer." She returned to the courtroom, feeling the tension burn between her shoulder blades. Officer Thorne watched her every move from then on, as if waiting for the slightest provocation. When the hearing resumed, Judge Wilcox allowed witness testimony. The first witness was an elderly man named Mr. Liu, who lived down the hall from Simone. He testified that Simone was always quiet, that she frequently traveled for work, and that he'd never heard any loud music from her apartment. Next came a young mother, Carmen Reyes, whose baby slept lightly. She confirmed that if there had been incessant noise, her infant would have surely woken up. But that had never happened, except on a single occasion when another neighbor's teenage kids threw a party. Miss S. Fitzgerald glared at Carmen and spat. "Are you sure you're not mixing up apartments?" Carmen stood her ground. "Absolutely sure. Miss Davis has never caused any trouble in our building." This second testimony sent Sims into damage control mode. He attempted to nitpick Carmen's statements, but the judge cut him short. Judge Wilcox seemed more convinced that the nuisance complaint was frivolous. Out of the corner of her eye, Simone saw Officer Thorne leaning against the wall. His eyes bored into her back like lasers. She tried to ignore him, but she could practically taste his hostility. It simmered there, intangible yet potent. The hearing took an unexpected turn when Judge Wilcox asked both parties if they had any further evidence. Miss S. Fitzgerald began to waver, her voice trembling with indignation. "She's lying about everything. She's always swaggering around the hallway like she's above the rest of us." Simone's attorney instincts, honed in part by the meticulous training she'd received in the military, where they taught her to process information quickly and speak confidently under pressure, kicked into high gear. She stepped forward. "Judge Wilcox, I have provided logs, alibis, and witnesses. The plaintiff has provided only personal testimony. If there's nothing more to offer, I ask that you dismiss this complaint." Judge Wilcox turned to Miss S. Fitzgerald. "Unless you have any new, concrete evidence, I'm inclined to dismiss." In a final desperate attempt, Miss S. Fitzgerald pulled out a crumpled paper. "I have this a noise citation from a different building Miss Davis lived in, dated over 5 years ago." She thrust it at Judge Wilcox. Simone recognized it immediately. It was from her previous residence, where she had lived near a busy intersection. She had simply reported that the building's elevator made loud clanking noises at night, which ironically ended up documented as a general noise complaint. It had been resolved within days, with the building manager apologizing for the confusion. Nothing about it indicated wrongdoing on Simone's part. Judge Wilcox scanned the paper, frowned, and set it aside. This doesn't appear to be a valid complaint against Miss Davis. It's a building maintenance issue from 5 years ago. It's irrelevant. I see no basis to continue. The complaint is dismissed. A strangled noise came from Miss S. Fitzgerald's throat. Sims tried to comfort her. Simone exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. I suggest you two address your issues civilly if you plan to remain neighbors, Judge Wilcox added. Court adjourned. Simone gathered her papers, thanked her witnesses, and prepared to leave. As she stepped into the corridor, Miss S. Fitzgerald brushed past her in a huff, refusing to make eye contact. The older woman mumbled something under her breath. Simone just shook her head, grateful the ordeal was over. However, outside the courtroom, trouble awaited in the form of Officer Garrett Thorne. He was speaking to a uniformed colleague, but as soon as he spotted Simone, he marched forward. Hey, wait. He blocked Simone's path. Need a word with you. Simone's instincts roared to life. She felt that jolt of adrenaline, the same kind she experienced on missions just before a breach. She fixed her gaze on him. What is it, officer? He gave her a cold smile. You think you can play the system, but I see right through you. You come here with your big folder of so-called evidence, push an old lady around, push her around. Simone repeated, incredulous. She falsely accused me. The judge dismissed the case. He ignored her logic. I know you're kind, sweet, talking your way out of trouble. You must have threatened her, intimidated your neighbors into lying for you. The seething anger in his voice made Simone wonder if he was unbalanced or simply a bigot. She leaned closer, her voice steely. I have no interest in threatening anyone. Garrett jutted out his chin, a gesture of challenge. I could arrest you right now for obstructing justice or disturbing the peace. Simone's fists clenched at her sides. She sensed the crowd around them. Attorneys, clerks, and civilians all watched with varying degrees of shock and curiosity. She kept her tone measured. Officer, you have no grounds to do that. The judge found me not guilty of any nuisance. This is harassment. He squared his shoulders. You think you're so tough, huh? In that moment, Simone made a conscious decision. She reached into her purse and extracted her wallet. She pulled out a challenge coin she had earned in the Navy SEALs after completing a particularly difficult joint operation. The coin bore the insignia of the Naval Special Warfare Command. She held it up at chest level, letting it glint under the fluorescent lights. Garrett Thorne, she said calmly, I served this country as a Navy SEAL. I faced enemies far deadlier than anything you can imagine. So let me be clear, you're not scaring me. Not today. Not ever. The shock on his face was immediate, followed by disbelief. His gaze darted from the coin to her stoic expression. That's not possible. Women don't. She allowed a small, mirthless smile. Looks like you need to update your assumptions. He snatched the coin from her hand to inspect it. For a moment, Simone wondered if he would bolt down the hallway with it. But as he read the inscription and recognized the authenticity, confusion flickered across his features. You're faking, he insisted, but his voice had lost some of its venom. Probably got this online. A quick-witted onlooker, a courthouse clerk who happened to be a veteran, stepped up. That's not a replica. My cousin's a SEAL. I've seen real challenge coins. They're not easy to come by. Garrett's face turned red, but he refused to stand down. Even if you did serve, that doesn't give you the right to disrespect law enforcement. Simone extended her hand, silently demanding her coin back. I respect law enforcement. I respect everyone who serves with honor and integrity. Do you serve with honor, Officer Thorne? A hush fell on the hallway. Garrett pressed his lips together, looking cornered and furious. Slowly, he dropped the coin into her hand, but his eyes never left hers. Then, as if desperate to salvage some show of dominance, he sneered, We'll see about this. Don't think this is over. Simone didn't respond. She slipped the coin back into her wallet, then turned away, leaving the officer rooted to the spot. Outside the courthouse, sunlight streamed through thick clouds, a welcome relief after the oppressive fluorescent lights inside. Simone took a cleansing breath, letting go of the tension that had weighed on her all morning. She paused on the steps, looking around at the city she called home. Despite the ugliness she'd just experienced, she reminded herself that she fought for freedoms, hers and others. She thought the ordeal was behind her, but as she descended the steps, Garrett Thorne emerged from the building. His posture was stiff with rage. "MAAM, wait," he called after her. She pivoted, half expecting yet another confrontation. Instead, she saw him fumbling with his phone. She watched as he made a quick call, his conversation muffled. Then he turned to her. "I have reason to believe you're carrying a concealed weapon," he said abruptly. Simone stared. "Excuse me," he lifted his chin, voice amplified. "Are you refusing a search?" Simone blinked, struggling to maintain her composure. "I'm refusing an illegal search. I'm not carrying a weapon." Garrett's colleague, Officer Jones, approached. He looked uncomfortable. "Garrett, we don't have probable cause. Let her go." Garrett glared at his co-worker. "You want to take that chance? She's a trained killer by her own admission." A small crowd formed around them, courthouse visitors, a few attorneys, passers-by on the sidewalk. Simone felt her pulse quicken. She was not about to be paraded as some criminal on the basis of her service. She met Garrett's gaze steadily. "If you have no grounds to detain me, I'm leaving." He lunged, grabbing her arm. Simone's training kicked in instantaneously. In a flash, she pivoted, used his momentum against him, and flipped him neatly onto his back. The crowd gasped. Officer Jones rushed in, but Simone stepped back, hands raised in a gesture of surrender. She had no desire to escalate further, but Garrett had forced her hand. Garrett, stunned and winded, scrambled to his feet. "You're under arrest, assaulting a police officer." Officer Jones stepped between them. "Hang on. She was defending herself after he grabbed her." Chaos erupted. People shouted. Cameras clicked, capturing every second. Simone stood silent, determined not to make another move. She was prepared for this moment. SEALs were always taught to expect the unexpected. She thought about her options. Forcibly resisting arrest would make matters worse. So she calmly let Jones lead her away from Garrett, who was cursing up a storm. She allowed Jones to check her purse in front of onlookers. As she'd stated, she was unarmed. Officer Jones gave Garrett a sharp glare. No weapon, nothing illegal, no basis for arrest. Garrett's entire demeanor unraveled in humiliation. "But she assaulted me. She reacted when you grabbed her," Jones said flatly. "It's on camera." The onlookers murmured in agreement. Even the courthouse security cameras likely caught the scene. Garrett realized the precarious situation he was in. He clenched his jaw so hard the muscles in his neck bulged. A supervisor from the police department arrived minutes later, alerted by calls from eyewitnesses. Lieutenant Maria Hansen wasted no time collecting statements. She interviewed Simone, who calmly recounted the events. She interviewed Officer Jones and bystanders, all of whom corroborated Simone's story. Finally, Lieutenant Hansen approached a still fuming Garrett. "I want your body cam footage," she demanded, folding her arms. "Now." Looking cornered, Garrett tried to shrug. "I wasn't on duty inside the courthouse, so I wasn't required to have it on." Hansen's eyes narrowed. "We'll see the security footage then. In the meantime, you're relieved of duty pending an investigation." Garrett's face turned ashen. "But no butses about it," Hansen snapped. "Hand over your badge and firearm, Officer Thorne." The crowd parted in a hush as Garrett reluctantly removed his badge and gun, placing them in Hansen's outstretched hands. Simone watched the scene with conflicting emotions, relief, validation, but also sadness that such hatred existed in the world she had served. She had no joy in seeing a fellow American humiliated, but she had fought too hard for her dignity to let anyone trample on it. The humiliation on Garrett's face was evident. He shifted his glare to Simone, as if blaming her for his downfall, but Simone refused to wilt under his stare. She had spent years honing her mental resilience. She was a warrior, after all, one who had faced greater threats in service to her country, and now justice was on her side. In the days that followed, the incident outside the courthouse made local headlines. Officer suspended after altercation with former Navy SEAL. News outlets highlighted the deeper issues of racial bias and abuse of power within law enforcement. Several activists called for a review of Garrett's past arrests, suspecting a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Investigations revealed multiple complaints against him that had been swept under the rug. Simone tried to return to her normal life. Though she valued her privacy, she recognized the potential impact her story could have on illuminating problems in the system. She gave a brief interview to a local journalist, focusing on the importance of integrity and respect values she felt had been violated. Garrett Thorne, meanwhile, faced disciplinary hearings. He was given the opportunity to resign quietly or face a formal termination. If the security footage was as damning as the eyewitness accounts, it could mean the end of his law enforcement career. Public pressure grew as more details of his misconduct emerged. Even his colleagues who once tolerated his behavior began to distance themselves. He had become a liability to the department. Meanwhile, Miss S. Fitzgerald's nuisance complaint was regarded as a sham. She retreated from the public eye, ignoring the stares of neighbors whenever she walked her small dog in the building hallway. She'd lost credibility among residents, and any illusions she held about controlling Simone's fate were shattered. In a final twist of karma, the building's management served Miss S. Fitzgerald with a violation notice for repeatedly harassing other tenants. It turned out she had lodged over a dozen baseless complaints in the past year. Her prejudice and sense of entitlement had finally caught up with her. As for Simone, she kept living her life with quiet confidence. Freed from the burden of false accusations, she returned to her fitness routine, took on consulting work that utilized her strategic skills, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of her Charleston home. She had proven her innocence and, in doing so, reminded everyone that appearances can be deceiving and that strength tempered by dignity could withstand even the fiercest storms. In time, people moved on to other stories, but those who were there that day, who saw the humility, courage, and sheer resolve of a woman standing up to injustice, would never forget Simone Davis. Nor would they soon forget how Officer Garrett Thorne's hateful assumptions destroyed his own reputation. Justice had been served, as swift and certain as the tide. And Simone, standing tall under the Carolina sun, carried on, buoyed by her unwavering faith in the principles she had once risked her life to defend: honor, respect, and the conviction that no one should be judged by color or background, but rather by the content of their character. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of Simone Davis's extraordinary story. Her journey reminds us of the power that comes with standing tall in the face of injustice and refusing to let prejudice go unchecked. Simone's composure, her unwavering integrity, and her hidden strength proved that real justice isn't just about winning a court case, but about revealing the truth and holding the guilty accountable. If you found inspiration or insight in Simone's battle, we encourage you to be part of our growing community. Like this video to show your support for stories that champion fairness. Share it with friends and family so that we can all learn from Simone's courage, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of resilience and triumph. Your engagement helps us continue bringing stories that uplift, challenge, and shine a light on the deepest truths of humanity.